Hi guys, welcome back to our YouTube channel. If you're new here, welcome, feel at home. This is our new home where everybody comes, finds a seat to sit on, finds a place to sit on, relaxes and enjoys. So today is yet another day that the Lord has made for us, that we should rejoice and be glad in it. It's been a long time ago since we made a video, and here we are. Let me start by saying thank you so much for those who've been supporting us by liking, commenting. As in, the more we interact in the comment section, the more we attract more people who want to understand what is happening here. So thank you so much. I don't take it for granted. Asanteni sana, Mungu awabariki. Today being 27th of October, I just thought, we've talked about so many things, but at the same time, we've left so many things. And I've been receiving messages in my inbox asking people asking me to explain what are the best states to move into, how long did it take you, that is in the United States of America. How long did it take for you to move to America after the exam, that is the NCLEX exam? What factors did you consider before you chose the state that you're going right now, or before choosing the state that you're settled right now? Some have been asking, because I realized you're with MedPro, what is the advantage of being with MedPro other than being with what do we call these other agencies? Because of course agencies are very many. And if you remember, if you've been a follower, if you've been a subscriber from time to time, you'll understand that I've been saying, I'll only talk about what I know, not what I hear, not what I see. Of course, there are some things I've talked about which are in the Google, they're in the website. So it's just something that you Google out and then you understand. But as of now, please, let's make Google our friends. Let's make Google our friends, and I believe we will get enlightened, all of us. You can also comment down below in the comment section and tell me, what do you understand in this journey that maybe somebody else might benefit out there. I might have left out so many information, but you're there, you have access to information. Please share it on the comment section. Let's interact with each other so that we understand what is this thing that Zippy left out, and maybe it will help. Okay, so today, without wasting so much time, let's talk about the states. How to choose a state when you're back in Africa, when you're back home. Maybe you're a Kenyan, you've never been to America, you don't know anybody who lives in America, but you're there and you're trying to immigrate, you're becoming an immigrant, you've processed your papers. So what is this thing that you will consider before you settle down on a particular state? First of all, let me say there is no state that is better than the other. It gets to a point, kama wewe ni Mkenya unasema bora tu nimefika America, because the economy in the country as of now, it's really terrible, right? There are times like where we are right now currently as a country, everybody is feeling the pinch. The dollar has really gone up. It's currently trading at 150 against the Kenyan shillings. Actually it's 150 with some points, with some cents. So you find that life has become so damn expensive. So everybody wants to migrate. Everybody wants to immigrate. So if you get a chance of you immigrating, you don't really care. Some people say they don't really care which state they will land into, as long as they're not in the land of Africa, as long as they've gotten into the land of America. So what are these factors that you need to consider before you move into the next state? Like before you select a state. When you're with an agency, like as usual, I had made some notes here, and it's always important for me to refer to when I was Googling or when I was trying to do a research for you guys and bring the information here. First of all, the first factor that you need to consider, if you have small kids, if you have kids, and if you yourself, you normally get affected by the extreme weathers. Maybe the extreme cold when it gets into winter season. Maybe you get affected by extreme heat when it gets to the summer seasons. So one thing you need to consider is weather. Weather. When you're doing your selection of the states, you do not want to go to a state that will have extreme cold during winter season, and you will not want to go to states that has extreme heat when it comes to summer season. States like Florida has the best beaches. It's one of the best states in terms of it's like a coastal region, you know. And in this case, if you're trying to think like you will immigrate and go settle down in Florida, ask yourself, will I be able to handle the hurricanes? Will I be able to handle the tornadoes? Those extreme winds when it comes to those seasons, okay? When it comes to a state like Montana, it gets extremely cold during the winter seasons. It's up in the mountains, okay? So choose the states. First Google and research, do enough research about the weather that exists in that state before you move to that state, okay? Weather is number one. The cost of living. Of course, life in America is not cheap. We all understand it's not as cheap as it is in Africa. In this case, we're talking about those people who are immigrating from Africa to USA. Life in America can never be compared to the life in Africa. Of course, life back home is cheap, right? Because you're working in your local currency, you're already used to your life there, you've been born and brought up maybe in that country, so you're already accustomed, you're already cultured, you're already used to that kind of life, so you don't find it that expensive, right? So when you're considering to immigrate from one state to the other, ask yourself, this state that I'm moving into, is it an expensive state, or it's a moderate state, or it's just a cheap state? Of course, there's no state that is cheap, right? Get me right, guys. Because the more you move to a county, to a state that is cheaper, you as a nurse, because in this case we are referring to nurses, it means maybe there is that probability you will not be finding these things we call overtime, the locums that we talk about back at home. Because, you know, I mean, it's not a developed state as per se. It is like moving from Nairobi, going back to Nakuru. When you're in Africa, Kenya to be precise, if you're in Nairobi city, that is the CBD. I mean, that's the center of, I mean, it's a capital city of Kenya, right? So you don't expect somebody who lives in Nairobi to say that life is cheap as somebody who lives in Nakuru. But at the same time, somebody who lives in Nakuru may not have a lot of locums, or the hospitals there may not be paying that well as compared to people who are in Nairobi. The development that is in Nairobi and the development that is in Nakuru might not be the same. It's the same thing that we're talking about the states. Cost of living will come hand in hand with the amount of money that you're being paid. For example, if you compare a state like Pennsylvania and you compare it with a state like North Carolina. Let's give an example with North Carolina. You find that those people who are traveling or who are migrating to North Carolina, they are being given a stipend, maybe like a house allowance or something, because life is a bit expensive as compared to those people who are in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, pardon my pronunciation, it is not as expensive as compared to North Carolina. So you find that those people who are working in North Carolina, the hospitals there, the agencies there consider the cost of living in that particular place. Because, for example, if you're paying me, we are under the same agency, we're under the same umbrella, you're paying me $32 per hour, and you're paying somebody who is in Texas or Pennsylvania $32 per hour. It means those people who are in less expensive states stand a higher chance of developing themselves higher, because even if you pay me that same amount, the cost of living in this other state is expensive. So consider the expensiveness. I mean, how do you say cost of living in that state? because you cannot consider, you cannot compare cost of living in Texas like in North Carolina. You cannot compare cost of living in North Carolina with California, okay? New York City. Those are two different states. I mean, those are two different, like maji na mafuta. I mean, they lie in extreme ends, okay? Another thing that you need to consider, because you're coming from a black continent. Okay, well, it's not a factor to consider as per se, but in a way you need also to consider, because you're coming from a place that you don't know, you know so many people, you know your family is there, you have family support, like everybody is back home with you, but then you're going to a new state. Remember, you also want to feel that homely, you know. If you go to a place like Seattle, like a place like Missouri, Minnesota, those kind of states, there's so many Africans there. You'll find so many Kenyans, especially Kenyans. In this case, we're talking about Kenyans. So you also don't want to go to a place that is dominated by the whites. I'm not being tribal. I'm just trying to tell you, you also want to feel homely. You also want to escape that homesick feeling, kinda. At least you want to feel like when you go to a hospital, you'll at least find Mkenya mwenzako mahali. You'll find your fellow Ghanaian. You'll find your fellow Ugandan, you know. So if you go to a state like, let's give an example of California, you find that there are so many states, there are so many whites. It's a white-dominated state. So do you really want to go there as a new immigrant? You've not even known the system, how the system works, and the only people you're interacting with, remember, you have culture shock. You've never interacted with these people. You've been seeing them in movies like the likes of akina Alejandro and stuff. Alafu wewe ndio umeenda kujizindikisha hapo, umeenda kujipata in a white state. You also want to consider those factors. You want to feel like you've talked a lot of English at work. When you go back to the house, your kids are already used to speaking English at work, at school, so they're also trying to speak to you you know, you also get tired. You also want to feel like you're at home, kinda. You understand? So also consider who are dominating that state. Don't go to a state whereby it has so many whites. When you're doing your research, don't go to a state that has so many whites or has so many blacks. Go to a state that is a bit neutral. A place like North Carolina, Texas, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Montana, Missouri, Seattle, Washington. Yes, those states, at least they have your fellow Africans, you know? We are together. Another factor that you also need to consider, we've already talked about weather, cost of living, who are dominating that county. Is it more states, or it's like factors to consider? Is it more blacks, or is it a black dominated state, or it's a white dominated state? Okay. Also, factors that to consider, another factor that you need to consider is the schools around that place, because of course, even if you don't have children, at some point you'll get children. So you also need to consider what kind of schools are there, right? What kind of schools are there? What kind of a community do I want to bring up my kids in? Especially if you have the high schoolers. The high schoolers are like the teenagers. They are at that level of rebellious and stuff. You know, when they get to America, they are taught about their rights. Kids in America and kids in Kenya are not the same. They are not the same in terms of like kids in America know their rights. So you also want to understand the kind of schools, the kind of district you're taking your kids to, so that the kind of people who are growing, ni kama kusema mtoto wako, sisemi kwa ubaya, lakini let's consider this. If you bring up your child in Runda, all in the environs of Runda, and somebody else bring their kids in Eastlands, those are two different people. Those are two different children. Yes, later in life, maybe they will meet at some point, but let's call a spade a spade. Those two people are different. We have ZPA and ZPB. ZPA was brought up in Runda, all in the environs of Runda, or Gigiri, or Karen, or wherever. So that is a rich kid estate or something. And ZPB was brought up and schooled in Eastlands, place like Umoja 1, Umoja 2, Dandora, or whatever, Karagocho, those kind of places. Of course, the kind of The kind of life ZPB is used to, it's not the same life ZPA is used to. Those are two different persons. We have to understand that. It's the same thing. If you bring up your kid maybe in California, and if you bring and you're bringing them in the outskirts of California, like in the CBD, the central point of, you understand? I hope you guys understand what I'm saying. Comment down below if you understand. Let's interact on this. We need to understand, all of us, okay? Also, the availability of the hospitals, in that state, right? The availability of the hospitals in that state. Because the more the hospitals, the more the home-based cares, the more the home cares, the home nursing and stuff, the more you as a nurse has got more chances of, making more money at your free time, because the competition is high. So everybody wants, not the competition is high as per se, but there are so many places that has got hospitals and that needs nurses. And like if you go to a place that is populated with, I think, about 300 people, but at the end of the day, the hospitals are only 3. So you see the competition is high because you guys are many, the workers are many, the nurses are many, but the hospitals are just 2. So you also want to go to a place. If, for example, I was to live in Nyahururu, let me just give an example of me who comes from Nyahururu. If I was to go and work in Nyahururu and somebody else works in Nairobi, me who is in Nyahururu has less chance of getting locums, because at the end of the day, we are chasing the bag. We want money anyway. Why are you immigrating from here to America? It's because you're looking for your greener pastures. You want to develop yourself financially. That is a first fact. And then you also want to develop yourself not emotionally, because you get emotionally drained. That's what I understand. But you also want to develop yourself financially, even professionally. Professionally and financially, those are 2 major factors that you need to consider, right? So you cannot tell me that you want to go and settle down in a place like Nyahururu, yet you had a chance of settling down in a place like Nairobi, right? So you also need to consider that point, whereby you need to understand how many hospitals are in that place, all right? How many hospitals are in that place? How many hospitals are in that state? And how many towns are in that state? Like how well populated is the state, right? And then what other factor do we need to consider? Of course, another factor that we need to consider before immigrating to the USA, before I forget, guys, when we are talking about states, this thing confuses people, because even me, before I came to understand, this thing confuses, like it gets to a point you don't even understand what's a state, what is a county, what is a what. A state in America is like a country in Africa, right? America is a continent which has got different states. We have the northern states, we have the southern states, we have the eastern states, and we have the western states, right? So when you're considering weather also, remember the eastern, the western, the what, it's like coming now back to Africa. In Africa is a continent that has different countries. In Africa, we call them countries, but in America, they call them states. So when you're talking about like what factors to consider before selecting a state in America, it means, in simple terms, before I move to Uganda, which is a different country from Kenya, what factors am I considering? How much money will I be paid if I move from Kenya to Uganda, which is a different country from mine? Is the same thing we are saying. Before you move to America, which state are you choosing? Because America is a state. Africa is a state. So before you move to Uganda, before you move to Minnesota, before you move to wherever, Minnesota is a state, but in the real sense, it's like a country in Kenya. Governed, the only difference is Africa is not ruled by one president. America is it's governed by one president. But then, of course, they have states, and each state has its own different rules, government, and stuff. It's the same way. We have the state rules and we have the federal laws. I hope you understand. I hope it makes, for somebody who had not understood, like who was not understanding states, when you're starting a journey, it becomes a bit difficult for you to understand, like, what is this thing people are talking about, right? So I think we've tackled weather, cost of living, black or white dominated state. We also talked about the schools. We've also talked about the house, the housing, the housing. Do you want to do a mortgage or do you want to rent? Okay. So if those are factors that you're considering, so if I get a house in like a state like Texas, let's give an example with Texas, because I understand most Kenyans end up settling down in um, in Texas. So maybe you started with North Carolina, or you started with California, or New Mexico, or Montana. But at the end of the day, you feel like that's not your state forever and ever. You don't want to remain there forever and ever. So from the initial stages, when you're selecting a state, or when you're choosing a state to go and settle down, you as a new immigrant, please consider, is this a state that I want to settle down forever and ever? By the time I'm gaining citizenship, USA citizenship, is this where I want to remain forever and ever? Right? Me as a nurse, if at some point I want to do travel nursing, is this a good place for me to raise up my kids in such a way that, of course, if you're a single parent, there's so many single parents who are settling down in America. So if you're a single parent and you have small kids, do you think that when you're becoming a travel nurse, that state that you're leaving your kids in is a state that is suitable for your children? Do you feel like that's a good state for you to buy a house, like a mortgage or something? How much are people charging? How much are rental house in that place, like a 2-bedroom house? How much will they charge me? You understand? So those are just but a few factors that I had researched and thought, but like, why not? Let me just bring them to you so that we see if maybe, for example, you never know, it might help somebody. And please comment down below so that at least we help each other. I may not be the best. Of course, I'm not the best. I may not be like I'm the one who knows everything. I also need your input, because at the end of the day, it will help somebody. So let's summarize by saying, if you've not subscribed and you've been watching, please subscribe. Don't just watch and just leave there. Comment down below. Tell us how we are doing. It's a family that we are growing, and thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you. I said, like I normally say every time, I don't take it for granted. There's so many other big channels. There's so many other biggest channels. There are so many channels out there, but you guys keep on coming back. I have my royal, not royal, but loyal subscribers who started with me from the beginning, when we didn't even know how to edit videos. Like, guys, if you check the first videos, it was worse. But there's some people who still chose to stick with me up to until now, when we are at 100 and something, 400 and something subscribers. I believe we'll get to 500, get to 1,000, and then get moving to even 1,000,000 subscribers. Anything is possible. With God, all things are possible. And remember, we always don't leave God aside. We always want to acknowledge God, because were it not for the hand of God, we wouldn't be here. It would be a different case. There's so many people out there who would have wanted to be here where we are today, but they're not there. So we don't take it for granted. And there's also something else that I would like to tell you. Please, guys, if you've not watched the previous videos, please watch them, subscribe if you've not subscribed, and share. Give it a thumbs. Okay? So thank you so much. God bless you. God bless you so much. God bless you. God bless you. Till next time.